right, recording is on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live with the Tundra Process Solutions podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Beacock.
And I am your other co-host, Mr. Erik Allan. And today's episode is all things mental health. In these crazy changing times, how do we stay centered? And we're no experts on this subject, so we decided to bring some experts into the conversation. First, I'd like to introduce our HSE advisor, Miss Kyla H. She's been with Tundra for 6 years now. She keeps us all safe, happy, and healthy, and is incredibly passionate about all things mental health. She even volunteers on a mental health support line. And Kyla, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Erik.
We also have a very special guest, Nina Hornjatkevyc. Nina is a practicing lead at Synthesis Psychology in Calgary Career Counselling. For over a decade, she has provided personal and career counseling support as a registered psychologist. Her areas of specialty include managing life transitions, anxiety, grief and loss, and supporting self-esteem. She is a highly sought after speaker in Calgary and beyond, and we are so pleased to have her here today to add insight to our conversation on mental health. I want to start out with a question. 10 years ago, arguably, we would not be having this conversation in a professional setting about mental health. What's changed so that we can facilitate this type of conversation now?
I think the biggest change that occurred has been the removing of stigma and people making the jump to have these conversations, and with the benefit of technology and making that conversation more accessible to people who need to have it. We have all sort of become a little bit more open in how mental health is a part of our everyday life. And that's why we call it mental health, not mental unhealth or these other words that have been used in the past. So it was really about removing that stigma, and specifically in the workplace, what we saw was the big shift from physical health versus mental health and how managing employees, how that came into play. So the workplace is taking it more seriously. As a health and safety professional, almost every conference I go to, the majority of the topics are mental health because it is so common. We all experience it, whether it's on smaller or larger scales. And whether we personally haven't, we're impacted by people who have. So it's everywhere. It's important to manage our mental health in order to stay in a healthy state instead of falling into maybe an unhealthy state. And these conversations are what's helping, and it's working. And that's why we're having conversations like this now.
Right.
I love that because it's, if you throw your back out, you go see the chiropractor. If you are having troubles mentally, you got to go find help, right? And it's no different. And that's what I think is really fascinating, that whether I fall off a ladder at work or I have a mental breakdown, it's now treated comparably.
Mm-hmm.
It is, yeah. And that was a really amazing shift to be a part of, because when I entered the workforce 6 years ago, I wouldn't have said it was as prevalent. And being a part of that journey and that shift in the health and safety of oil and gas companies and other businesses that are running from a health and safety optimization, it's been amazing because it impacts productivity. Mm-hmm. And we can support people through it if we're willing to educate ourselves, figure out signs and symptoms that we might recognize in employees or in our workers, that they might be going through something that usually isn't work related. Sometimes it is. But being able to open up a dialogue to have that conversation of, hey, I don't think you're a crappy employee. I've just noticed that you've been late the last week and a bit, and that's not usually like you. Is there something going on? Can I help you seek support through our EAP program? Mm-hmm. Things like that. And so I've been working with our management team to educate them on those signs and symptoms. I also run our EAP program, and we start to have access to people. Sorry?
For those that don't know, what's an EAP program?
An EAP program is our employee assistance program. It's run through our benefits, and most organizations have them. The joy of an EAP program is that we can support you with short-term counseling via phone or in person for a singular activity occurring in your life. So this is Tundra specific, but for our employees, for example, they can call the number, they can have immediate support in that moment, or they could set up counseling for the next 5 weeks.
Right.
And so that's
I think you've hit on a good point. Is one of the things that's changed is people have lessened their fear towards opening up to somebody else or seeking that help. And this is really where Nina comes in. And Nina, can you tell us some of the things that you're seeing now in terms of, I know you can't get specific on the clients that you're seeing, but in general terms, maybe because of the current situation that we're facing globally or locally, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing from the people that are coming in?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. And it's such a good point that there's a lot less stigma about help seeking, and this is definitely something we want to promote. And one of the things we're finding is that at our synthesis psychology practice and at our Calgary career counseling practice is that people are coming forward, which is really, really great. Because there's so much more that can be done if people say something. And people are forward, and people forward for support for themselves, but some people are coming also asking for people who are important to them, whether it be, let's say, somebody in their personal life, or whether it be some, like they're a manager, they're a leader, and they want to support people on their team, and they recognize that it's like we're a whole person, we're a whole unit. So at our synthesis psychology practice and at our Calgary career counseling practice, we're seeing a real range of issues. To be totally honest, some people are telling us that they're actually doing pretty well, that their lives haven't changed all that much. And some people have actually said that aspects of their lives are even improved. Like they're really deliberate about how they're communicating with people. They have been thinking about what is the most important in their lives. It's almost like this sense of a real connection to what's meaningful, and what's worth spending effort and energy on. Some people have found that, like, let's say even essential workers who we're working with, like say frontline support, even like some people in healthcare, you'd think that everything would be stressful. And some of them are talking about the fact that, yeah, of course there's some stresses, but they're finding that there's this like a shared purpose, a sense of what's really, really important, and everybody working together on this really, really important issue. And so some of that is actually coming across from the people we're seeing. Having said that, and maybe not surprisingly, since I work as a psychologist, and people do reach out usually when they want some support with something, is that there are a lot of people who are saying that there's a lot of stress going on. Some of the most frequent things we're seeing is anxiety, lower mood, disrupted sleep. Definitely some people are finding their relationships haven't improved, that there are some challenges happening, and balancing, like trying to find that balance. Like a lot of people are, whether they're working at home for the first time, like basically full time, or whether they're on the front lines, trying to balance, like let's say their professional life and their personal life. If they've got kids, I've got kids. And so trying to have all of that happen while people are also looking after, let's say, their health and well-being. So definitely some of those kinds of things have been coming across in people's conversations and what they're seeking support for.
Well, along with some of the challenges, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is some of the things that people can do to manage those challenges. I don't think they're ever going to go away. But what are some of the things that people can do to help manage those things that might be coming up right now for them?
So I would say one thing to keep in mind that's super, super useful is that we're all wired to, when we're under stress, to get this like fight, flight, freeze reaction happening. And as much as that can be challenging, like fight can come across as like, wow, you're really frustrating me, or I'm like really, really annoyed with you right now. There can be like the flight, which is like, I really don't want to have to deal with this right now. And like, I want to like binge watch everything, and I want to like binge play every game that was ever made. And the freeze, I should say, can come across as like not knowing what to do. It's like, I don't even have the energy to be bothered to come up with a solution right now because I just can't. Like there's just so much, and feeling like you don't have all the answers and that kind of thing. So these kinds of reactions are totally, totally normal, and they're expected when there's a high stress situation. Now, something that's super, super valuable also to keep in mind, what can help, is that all of those reactions are actually meant to to get our attention, and to help us to respond. So if they can be identified, and every one of us can have all three of them, it's just like depending on the situation, depending on the person, some are more common than others. But if you know what those reactions are actually trying to do or to design to do, like the fight response can actually motivate taking action. It can actually motivate like, okay, well, I'm going to have a conversation about that with somebody, or like this has been really bugging me. So like maybe I can collaborate with some other people and we can figure out a solution to something. If somebody is dealing, let's say, with the flight, where like having some distance from something can actually give you a bit of benefit of perspective. Like you can't like stare at the sun all day, every day, right? Like having a bit of a chance to like get away from something for a while, take a breather. You sometimes have a different, like more bigger picture perspective. Exactly, right? When you come back to it. And like the freezing sometimes helps. There's some situations where it's better not to make the situation worse. Where it's like, okay, I'm just going to say anything right now. It's not saying anything forever. But looking at, okay, so will there be an opportunity to like just, I don't know, gain some perspective, or think about, because if I don't have all the answers right now, if I pause for a while and maybe understand that I can't have the answers to everything all the time, and that kind of like acceptance of not having to have all the answers, not being able to have all the answers all the time, can really help when you're dealing with something like COVID, where there isn't a fully known end date to all of this. So if you know what your signs are, then you can think about, okay, so what can be ways that I can use each of those, let's say the fight, flight, freeze reactions in a really productive way.
That's super interesting. It's almost like it's an indicator, right? And if you can observe it, and I find that that's often one of the most challenging parts, is being an observer of how you are actually feeling. Instead of being mad, realizing that you're mad. You're like, whoa, I'm really angry right now. And I've actually found that to kind of diffuse it a lot as well. We're just observing it.
I think it's an interesting point to take these emotions as well and to change how we perceive them. Like we have these so-called negative emotions, and for myself, I think these are so valuable. I see myself as a self-help junkie, really. And for a good portion of my life, I put myself in these destructive feedback loops because I'm always thinking about myself and how I can get better and be better. But it becomes destructive when you put yourself in a feedback loop. But at the same time, I realized over the last several years that these things are helping me identify the places where I want to change and where I want to be better. As long as I don't put myself into a feedback loop of these things, then I can use that tool to identify where I want to get better and proceed to try to be better in certain situations. And I like what you said about, taking these so-called negative emotions and using them to full effect, or even that flight, fright, or flight, fight response, or freeze. Like you said, I'm one of those people that I'm a flight person. I get into a situation like that, especially with a partner or someone close, and I need to get away, and I need that time away to think. And I think, as with our partners and our family that we're interacting with, if that's the type of person that we have in our lives, are we that type of person, we should be soft with allowing them to be able to do that and move past. And but yeah, I really like, that's an interesting point that you brought up there.
Awesome.
It really is. I think one thing too, with all the change that's occurring as a result of COVID, like we've been talking about, there's a lot that's out of our control. And I think that's amplifying people's ability to drop into those fight, flight, or freeze modes. And so all of a sudden, maybe you were a flighter before, but now you're like trying to avoid home while you're home and the people in it. And it feels like it piles on a little bit. So that self-awareness piece is so important.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, just with your experience volunteering on the support line, how do you help folks that just need somebody to talk to?
The majority of the time, we're all just looking for someone to listen. And sometimes we feel like we don't have that person in our lives, or we can't disclose certain things about how we're feeling to the support people we have around us, or maybe those support people aren't listening. because they're busy dealing with their own need for support. So you kind of get lost in our family structures, in our friends structures, in our relationships, especially when people have dealt with trauma, which is specifically the line that I work on. You kind of have that trauma in the back of your mind, and then you project it onto things that are happening in your life. And so someone could just be having a really bad day, and a strange or weird encounter with a stranger where they felt they didn't present themselves well, or thought they were kind of mean, and that's not natural for them, and they just want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the biggest thing, no matter how you're feeling, is there's going to be someone there to listen. You just need to start paying attention to the people that are willing to sit in that seat. Because sometimes you need a certain type of listener in those moments. And when you don't have that listener, there's so many resources in Calgary where there's phone calls that you can make, and there's free resources that you can have, and there's professional resources like Nina's organization that you can lean on and just have a soundboard.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
And you really figure out a lot of stuff yourself once you start talking about it.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Nina, could you maybe talk a little bit about some of the communication strategies that we could use to help each other just talk about things and not have pressure cookers that eventually explode?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, to support Kyla's point about having somebody to talk with, right? This is the thing, is that yes, absolutely. There are some benefits to getting to talk with a mental health professional. There's also so much that anybody can do by listening. I find that a lot of people really genuinely want to be helpful. It's not that everybody needs to know everybody else's business, and it's not that everybody has to have solutions for everybody else's stuff. But if people know that if they talk about something, that they're going to be, like, that information is going to be treated with respect. They're going to be heard, and that maybe somebody has some great ideas, but maybe they don't, and the reason that they're talking is that they just want to be there for you because what you're going through is important. So there's just a lot to be said for genuinely opening up your ear, like our ears, and hearing what people have to say. And to support that, asking open-ended questions goes a long way. Like, and genuinely being curious is like, so how are you doing? Like, how's everyone doing in your family? Like, even starting meetings, like, how's everybody doing? Let's go around the table. Let's go around, like, well, the virtual table for the most part, but if it's a physical table, with how's everybody's evening, and it's not like you have to go into like a half-hour story with everyone. There's no time for that, but it's like doing the check-ins. And before launching into, okay, so what needs to happen, because a lot of us are working remotely, being able to talk a bit about that and finding out about what's going on, and then launching into, let's say, having a conversation about work, about what needs to happen. And like, if everybody gets a chance to talk about where things are at, then you get more of a sense of, okay, so what's actually likely to be possible in this conversation. Something that people can do in their own, let's say, personal lives is to set up times, like at least once a week, to be able to sometimes have like hard conversations, the difficult conversations. Okay, so what are some concerns? What are some things that aren't working? What are some things that we need to figure out? And to know that there's going to be that devoted time, that time set aside to be able to talk about some of these kinds of things. And also having at least one time a week to be able to not talk about those things. Like, to be able to just like to hang out, to talk about other things, to know that there's at least once a week where it's not like every conversation is going to be like, okay, so how are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to do this? How are we going to manage this? Those have to be discussed. Absolutely they do. But there's also so much, just from a relationship support perspective, benefit to being able to have those things that connect us, and actually making that a priority. Where, let's say, whether it's obviously like if you're in a couple partnership, we're having that opportunity for connection, which, by the way, when you've got little ones, like, they're not old, like, they demand a lot of attention. So that's where having that opportunity to connect goes a long way. And then also reaching out to friends, people you haven't been in touch with maybe in ages. I've had a couple of those kinds of conversations lately, and wow, it's great. Like, even though people are talking about like lots of different stuff, but being able to connect and like reminisce and talk about what you're looking forward to, and some of that kind of stuff. It definitely helps.
I want to step back to something that you said about taking some time to not talk about current events and maybe setting that aside for a second and just leaving it behind for at least a little bit, actually being aware of that and stepping away. I think there's a large part that social media might play here. Social media and news. Like I've stepped away from social media several months ago, and I think it's probably the best decision given our current situation that I could have made, because I'm not getting that constant influx of negative news essentially. But I do read the news a lot. There is a lot of negativity in the news. Obviously, it's something that sells newspapers and gets people to log on to their websites. How do you think that plays in all of this? I've read some articles on mental health saying stay away from stuff like that right now. But is there a connective piece that we can still use with the social media that could be helpful? Should we distance ourselves from it completely? How do you think we should interact with those platforms?
I would say it really depends on the person. I would say overall, if it's possible to have, like, let's say with news sources, checking maybe once a day, twice a day, if it's possible. I've certainly had conversations with some people who are in media where that is like their bread and butter. They can't do that. So that's been interesting because they're managing being so exposed to all of this. But for the rest of us who don't have to be exposed to that all the time, then yeah, having your reputable sources of information, but not being steeped in it like all day, every day. When it comes to social media, I know that there's a lot of benefit to having some distance from it. If there are some people that don't tend to go down the rabbit hole of, let's say, really contentious forms of discussion, let's call it that, then maybe there are people who you can continue to interact with and have certain types of discussions where it's going to be more about opportunities, more about ideas, more about let's say forms of connecting and supporting each other. That kind of version of social media involvement can still work, but definitely watching what you're being exposed to, and you could be, like, each of us could be that source of, let's say, hope, information, that kind of thing, to help to counterbalance some of what otherwise can come up on social media. And I would say in general, a strategy that can be helpful is if somebody posts something and you disagree with it and you have concerns about it, it's not about necessarily ignoring that. You can reach out, but better to reach out to that person directly and to let them know what it was that you found concerning, or something that you don't necessarily share exactly that perspective on. Way better to do that in a private message kind of a way than to unleash on the feed.
Yeah, interesting. I've got another one. I want to switch the topic up a little bit. Productivity, and this is something that's at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and I have a big problem with it because we're in the middle of a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen for the last 100 years. Some of the most challenging economic times that we've seen. People are worried about their families. They're worried about whether or not they're going to have a job next month, paying bills. I would argue that people, whether they're sitting in an office or sitting in front of a computer screen at their home, are going to have the same challenges of trying to focus wherever they're sitting in this moment. And, I think we're going to see a lot of metrics coming out on productivity and where that goes. I don't like it because I think we would see a drop in productivity because of the mental challenges that people are seeing right now. But I mean, I think we're seeing people settle into their homes. get used to the challenges of working from home. Erik and I have a regular meeting several times a week with a gentleman that has a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old, and his wife is extremely busy in her position at the government. And so they're both trying to juggle babies. You could see them passing them back and forth, and they're sitting on their lap crying when we're having meetings. And I think we really need to have patience with ourselves and with our coworkers when we're running into situations like that, like, you know, screaming babies and kids around. I think it's great to see the humanity of the individuals that we work with every day. I think that's actually really special that we have an opportunity to do that, see who we really are behind these suits that we're wearing all the time, you know? So what are your guys' positions on productivity, and where do you think that's going? And maybe some tips and insights into, you know, what we can do to I don't want to say be more productive, but I mean, to be soft with ourselves and handle those challenges of productivity while we're working at home.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said, Jason. Like, it's just about accepting where you're at and not judging yourself one way or the other. Maybe you are being exponentially productive in things that aren't work related, but you've been wanting to do for a really long time. Maybe you are all of a sudden really excelling at work because distractions are less. But it could go either way. We have families, we have a shift in our experiences. And I was writing a piece specifically about productivity for Tundra and our employees. And it was a lot about scheduling and, you know, trying to keep yourself accountable for the tasks, staying away from distraction zones in your house. But even with that advice and those particular things, breaks are exponentially important, because I could easily sit in this office now that it's my home until 8 p.m. Mm-hmm. And so how do I create, and Nina kind of touched on this earlier, which I really loved, was those compartmentalized aspects of our lives. Because for me, I'm huge at compartmentalizing. I like to think pretty good at it, but I always had the ability to change my physical space in order to create that compartmentalization. So I would leave work and I would use that 30-minute drive home to shift into my home, my relationship, whatever was going on here. We also run a business together. So I knew I was going to be focusing on that evening. So creating that shift was easier when I had that 30 minutes. Now it's like, okay, I just leave this office and I'm sitting in the living room. And me and my partner discussing that shift in what I needed in those moments, because he also works from home. It's been an interesting journey, right? And we all have to go through that on our own. Mm-hmm. And that's when talking to others is important and figuring out a plan that works for you. But yeah, I don't know, Nina, what do you think?
So in terms of productivity, there are some things that can help. Like, let's say when it comes to anybody, that idea of being gentle with ourselves is incredibly valuable. There's a lot that we're thinking about. There's actually, if you ever want to look it up, there's a phenomenon called decision fatigue. And and this is like a researched phenomenon, which actually impacts things like people who do surgery and people who are on parole boards and figure out who gets paroled and who doesn't. Like, depending on how many decisions people have had to make over the course of a day, this will impact, let's say, how flexible people are in their decision making and all that sort of stuff. And so all of us are dealing with a lot of things that we're thinking about, and they might seem like really trivial decisions, like some of them, like, let's say, like, what am I, like, do I wear jeans today or do I wear dress pants? Because is anybody actually going to see my legs? Like, these kinds of decisions are not necessarily like life and death kind of decisions, those kinds of decisions anyway, but they add up because these are things that we just like develop processes for, but we're having to redevelop a lot of processes, right? So there's a lot that is on our minds. So the fact that people are talking about, let's say, having just like not the amount of energy that they expected to have, not getting as far with some of like the personal development projects or home projects or whatever it was that they thought that they would get to, because there's just like a lot to think about. Now imagine, like, for the people who are on the front lines and where they're making like really, really like life impacting decisions, or they're thinking about, like, let's say, they're working in a grocery store and they're thinking, how about this person? Might they be sick? Or how about this person? Might they be sick? And so when you think about people in those kinds of circumstances, there's a lot that impacts how much mental space we have for, okay, so how much am I going to accomplish? How many decisions am I going to make? So there's a lot of benefit to collaborating. Like, let's say working on having people who are in a related situation who can talk to each other, who can say, okay, so maybe we'll brainstorm something or we'll map something out, because not everybody's like an in-person brainstormer. But like, can we map something out and then come back and figure out some, like, let's say, next steps on a project. I know on our team, we have a daily huddle every morning to say, okay, so given like and everybody goes around and says, okay, so what are your priorities? What are you planning to get done? And then somebody else says, oh, you know what, I really need your help with this, this, and this. And so adjusting priorities live and in the moment, and people set up their priority 1, their priority 2, and priority 3s for the day. And so just like being able to work on that together, that is like the mental resources of several people trying to help everybody map out their day. So we're getting stuff done, but we're taking joint responsibility for how we can all do that together. Taking mini breaks, I love this concept, and that has a ton of research support for it too. And like full on people who have really high stress occupations, like military leaders who know that their decisions literally impact life and death, people who have a lot of high stakes decisions to make on a daily basis. And something that's been found to support their productivity is weaving in mini breaks throughout their day.
What does a mini break look like?
So a mini break can be like a 3-minute break where somebody gets up and does a bunch of squats. Or a 5-minute break where somebody closes their eyes, like doesn't fall asleep, but is like, just like has a moment. It can be longer than that. Ideally, there will be some longer breaks than that, but like weaving in these mini breaks, because our brains will tend to take them anyway. But if the brain just sort of like shuts off and you're like, whoa, like, you know, when you've started to come back online, but it's frustrating then because you feel like, oh, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? What was I working on? If you just weave them in and they're more intentional, then you're going to actually feel like you have more control over that, and you're not going to feel as frustrated by if you find that your attention just started to shift and you're like, okay, so how long was I not productive?
Great.
I like the idea of squats. I'm trying to get my butt ready for the beach when they open up. So
Perfect.
We're just getting to the close. We've got a couple minutes left. One of the things that Erik and I wanted to talk about is some of the things that we all use here to keep us motivated and centered, and just in general in good spirits as we go through life. And maybe Kyla, can we start with you? What are some of the things that you do to keep yourself on the centered path?
Yeah. Physical activity has been a huge part of my life for a very long time. But again, it was always driving to a place, like driving to a gym or driving to volleyball or driving to a sports team or game outside, usually softball for me in the summer. And that kind of went by the wayside when I started at home, and I was like, oh, I could start doing all these things. In the first week and a bit, I didn't really do anything. And now that I can bike outside, I'm doing that a lot, which is lovely. So just getting outside in any capacity really is important to me. That connection with getting out of the home and being physical, whether that's running or biking or tossing a football around in the park with my partner, like it's got to be something. And so I try and do something like that every day. And then I found a little app for like an in-home workout, and I've started to wake up at the same time. So every morning at 6:30, which I would wake up that time when I was going to work, I'm still doing the same time. And that's been really healthy for my sleep patterns and my physical patterns as well. So keeping that morning ritual has helped me a lot.
Very good. Speaking of morning rituals, that's exactly what I've been finding a lot of benefit in is every morning. My background, I've been in martial arts my entire life, and I have a strong affinity towards martial arts, and it's what got me into meditation and mindfulness and all that stuff. And so what I've been doing lately is Qigong, which is an ancient Chinese, like 3,000-year-old, basically movement meditation. And it's beautiful. So every day I focus on my breath, I do my Qigong movement, and I get my body moving, and I get all energized and jacked up for the day. And that seems to be working really well.
Nice.
For me, I, like Kyla, I get up at the exact same time every day. I start out with a 20-minute meditation. Usually throw gratitude into that meditation. My achievements are things that I liked about the day before, set myself up for the day ahead, do some yoga, and I work till noon or so and do another little workout, get my body moving around again, work till around 5 o'clock and go for a run and get out, and then I come back and eat, and I play music, I write, and get out all of those things. It's my processing, it's my meditation, it's all of those things rolled into one. So lots of things there for me to leverage if I need to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Definitely a bit of an activity theme. I'm going to join that one. My sister and I live oceans apart. And so we recently started doing the same workout at the same time. So I obviously, it's a different time of day for her, but and I can't see her. We're not doing that. But I know she's there, and so I know that she's working on it. I'm working on it, and so it's a way that we're like checking off a lot of boxes. Basically, we get to connect, we talk about it, and then we also get to actually get a workout in. Something that my partner and I have been doing is checking in about things that we're grateful for.
Nice.
So if it's like, okay, especially now, like 3 things that we're grateful for or proud of accomplishing. And we brought our daughter into this, she's 7, so she's able to list some things. And so we have like a running list. And that's been really, really nice also, because there's lots of things to think about, and there are a lot of important things to think about things that are challenging, but getting to acknowledge the things that are working and the things we're grateful for has helped a lot.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
gratitude is super. I know, Erik, you practice gratitude a lot as well. And, I think it's shifting your perception of these things. Like you said, there's a lot of challenges right now. And setting aside all of those things that are really difficult that we're going through as a community, talking specifically about the death and the sickness that's happening. I've heard Iggy talk about this, for every challenge is an opportunity, and that's really how I want to view what's happening right now. To me, it's a gift to be thrown outside of your everyday routine that you do, because it gives you a opportunity to have perspective on the things that you're doing and ask yourself, is this how I want to be doing things? Can I be doing it a little bit different way? And so yeah, the shifting perspective and especially gratitude is so important. But just wrapping up, is there anything else anyone wants to say in closing? Or
Speaking of gratitude, I'm just grateful to be part of this conversation, and I want to thank you both for joining us today and sharing this knowledge and wisdom that you've gained over the years in your respective paths. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners got a lot of value out of that. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Nina, for those who do want to learn more about where your office is and the services you provide, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, thanks. And thank you so much for having me and for including me. And in terms of accessing support, there's a lot of really, really great resources out there. I know that, if people want more information, even about some topics, I know on our Synthesis Psychology website, so if people look up synthesispsychology.com, we have a blog page. And so there are articles there and resources about anxiety, about sleep strategies, social media also. People can follow, and we're posting tips. We're trying to do we're doing at least a couple every week, maybe not every day. But there's lots of good stuff there. And then for Calgary Career Counselling, also calgarycareercounselling.com is a place to find us. And so that's more on, let's say, supporting the work side of life. So there's lots of resources also on our blog page and our social media there also. And there's really, really good resources like Kyla was mentioning, the support line that she volunteers on is incredibly, incredibly important. There's a lot of great resources and people volunteering their time and making a valuable contribution genuinely when people need to reach out.
And we're going to put all those links at the bottom here on all our social media channels to the support line that Kyla is with Synthesis and the
Calgary Counseling Center.
Calgary Counseling Center.
Career
Counseling Center.
Almost.
And Calgary Counseling Center is awesome too.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both very much for being here, and thank my co-hosts for being here, and we'll see you on the next Tundra Process Solutions podcast.
Absolutely. Until next episode, we will see you there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and focus on gratitude. That's a great takeaway.